This is Tuesday, March the 2nd. We are going to start on a new unit called the Industrial Age and Imperialism. Now, a definition for imperialism is to come, but you will not ever be able to be an imperialistic country if you are not part of the Industrial Age. Now, what we know is industry is the taking of raw materials and we use machine to create a finished product. So if you have a board and you cut it with a power saw and then you nail the board to make the frame of a home, that would be an industry. The Industrial Revolution is where we have many machines that are used to create products that enhance the economy of a particular country. Now, I believe industry is one of the terms that is on our term sheet. The first country in Europe to be an industrial power was Great Britain. Great Britain is actually going to go through two industrial revolutions. The first industrial revolution occurred in the early 1800s when British industry is going to take raw cotton and raw wool and turn it into garments. This is what we call textiles. The second industrial revolution is going to start in the 1860s, where we're going to take iron and add carbon to create steel. And steel is necessary for the railroad. Now, Great Britain had a fairly abundant labor supply. Great Britain had a fairly abundant natural resources when it came to the beginning of the first industrial age. Great Britain had money. They had people who were willing to take this money and invest it into industry. Now, future nations will use Great Britain as an example to create an industrial revolution. That's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the British over the 19th century and look at their industry. Now, before the 19th century, most of the nations of Europe were agricultural. During the 19th century, that would be the 1800s, most of the nations of Europe are going to turn to industry. Great Britain was the first. This is an example where water has been diverted and the water is placed on this wheel to turn it, and the turning of the wheel provides the power for the spinning of looms and spinning wheels to make our raw wool or raw cotton into a garment. Great Britain at first used Egyptian cotton and English wool to make fabrics, but Egyptian cotton is very fine. British factories need more. The United States in the 1800s is going to go through an agricultural revolution, and those states, which are from Virginia and south of Virginia, began to grow cotton. It is said that cotton became king in the United States. The American cotton was so great that it was more than what the Americans could turn into textile, so our cotton was shipped to European countries. Now, the technology to produce textiles came to America, and America soon became a textile power. But it's important to put in your notes that the United States is going to lead the world in the production of cotton. Britain will be the first country to produce a steam generator. This is where we light a fire and the fire boils water, and the water is necessary to turn pistons. You can see here that the British have taken their steam engine and they have hooked it up to rotating wheels, and this would be an example of a train. Now, disaster struck in 1861 because of the Civil War in the United States. The North, the Union, is going to blockade southern ports, and the South will be prevented from exporting cotton to Europe. Now, in time, the Union forces will invade southern states, and when they come across the cotton that has been stored by the southern states, they will destroy it. So now Europe is in a tough spot. It needs cotton, but there is no cotton coming from the United States. This means that Europe is going to have to look for new places to get its cotton. European countries are going to develop railroads. It was determined that railroads could move lots of material quickly, but these railroads required steel. Now, it was a British chemist by the name of Bessemer who is going to invent a way, when iron is in its molten state, to inject carbon, and this carbon will change the chemistry of the iron and turn it into steel. Steel will allow for bridges to be built with longer spans. Architects could use steel to build taller buildings. Now, after the American Civil War, the United States is going to join Europe in our industrial revolution. Now, for many countries, the limiting factor was natural resources. Now, for countries like the United States and Germany, they were rich in natural resources. But other countries who had manpower, who had money, who could do everything for industry except natural resources, now is going to have to start looking for natural resources in other places besides Europe. Industry calls for a workforce. The workers need to live close to the business because the workers are going to have to walk to the factory so they can get their job done. Now, it will be up to the countries to make sure that the areas where the workers live are devoid of disease and has plenty of food. Now, please understand, this is a difficult task. We might have a situation where sanitary waste is mixing with drinking water, and this will cause disease. We might have a situation where we don't have enough food to provide to our workers. Ireland, for example, went through a potato famine, and this is going to affect Great Britain. In the 19th century, governments were asked what to do about the people. Now, by and large, the people who owned the factories were not concerned. They believed that government should be the one to protect the welfare of the people. Now, this produced two schools of thought. Number one, British economist Adam Smith is going to say that government should not get involved with the workers. He used a French term called laissez-faire. Now, laissez-faire translated into English means government, you need to keep your hands off of business. Smith believed that if government tried to make rules for business, this would mean that business would have a difficult time trying to better themselves. Now, Smith's ideas are going to be backed up by another Englishman by the name of Thomas Malthus. Now, Malthus is going to write that the population is always going to increase faster than the food supply. That when the government tries to prevent starvation, its efforts are going to get harder and harder, and become more of a drag on the national treasury. Malthus believed that there would come a time in which the government could not protect its workers anymore, and the workers would just naturally die by the wayside. Now, this is what we call school of thought number one. School of thought number two is championed by people like Robert Owen. Robert Owen is a Scotsman who owned a textile business. Now, Owens believed that it is up to government to control key industries. Owen believed that the railroads, for example, were a key industry to all the industries in Great Britain. Owen suggested that the government buy all of the railroads. Now, this is what we call socialism. And then there was Karl Marx. Karl Marx suggested that government should have ownership of all industries, not just key industries, but all industries. Marx believed that there were two groups of people. There were those who were out for the good, the worker, and those who were out just to make money. These are what Marx called the bourgeoisie. Marx suggested that in a truly industrialized country, the worker, or what he called the proletariat, would rise up and take economic and political control of the country. Now, this here is a video on Karl Marx. Now, tomorrow, we're going to look how Marx's ideas, how Owen's ideas, how Smith's ideas are going to affect the various countries of Europe.